Good afternoon. My name is Renard Perminter, and I'm a 6-year Army veteran, but for the past 8 years, I've worked as a federal employee for 2 agencies, TSA and currently the U.S. Marshal Service. For both agencies, I've worked as a tester and an end user within software development teams. I became more intrigued with software development after discovering its unlimited capability and seeing just how transformative the end products were to our operations. I tried the self-taught route for a while, which eventually brought me to Savvy Coders to further expand on what I've learned. For my Capstone project, I decided to create a single-page web application using the MEN stack with a single-page application platform that allows users within a group to manage their recreation, whether it be a family, work group, or just a group of people who share a common interest. Let me show you what my original plans were for this project. Here you can see my wireframes, or the visual representation of the project. As you can see here from my homepage view, there are 4 links in the navigation bar representing 4 views. In the home view, or the current view, I plan to render a profile card, local weather, and local events, along with the confirmed events the group plans to attend. Now let's switch over to the events view. In the events view, I plan to render local events, along with a request form that will reference the local event data to pre-populate the fields when the event name is typed in. This form would have also allowed for manual entry of events. Switch over to the funding view. In the funding view, I plan to render a shared bank account balance from an API I would implement into the project, along with a form to request funding from a shared bank account to pay for the confirmed events or activities associated with them. Switch over to the last view, task. In the task view, which I will later call My Events, I plan to render a form to upload receipts to reconcile the shared bank account transactions, a messaging API for members of the group to communicate, and a voting platform for the suggested events to be voted on by the users. Let me also show you the user flow, or the visual representation of how the user will navigate through the application. Here you will see the user will initially arrive at a login page for authentication and be routed to their homepage when it is successful. I also plan to add hierarchical structure to the users within the group to further define their roles, rights, and permissions. But at its core, all users, regardless of their role, be able to make funding requests and event requests that would be voted on and submitted for approval by the group administrator. And once funding and event requests were approved, events would be added to a shared calendar and an allotment would be made to a shared bank account. In the initial stages of planning my Capstone project, I was a bit ambitious, but I would soon be brought back into a sustainable process by using agile methodologies and Jira ticketing and project tracking software. At this point, there was still one critical undefined variable between the concept of my project and the reality of its execution: my knowledge as a developer. So as the cohort went along and I learned new concepts, I created user stories and acceptance criteria over a period of 6 2-week-long sprints to bring my project to its current state. Let me show you what I have now. So here in the home view, you will see a profile card that renders the current user's information, which includes their name, title, and the name of the group the person is a part of. And next to it, I have a weather card where I'm using a built-in browser API, geolocation, to obtain the user's browser location in a latitude and longitude format. I then use an API called Open Weather to pass those values into a GET request to obtain local weather information. Next to this card, I have a carousel, which functions as a viewer for the user's uploaded photos. In the next view, events, you can see that I'm rendering a table of events that are also local to the user's browser location. For this view, I'm using an API called SERP API, which scrapes the Google Event Server to return event data, which is the same functionality as if a person were to manually query Google for local events. Here, I'm also using the same built-in browser API, geolocation, as in the home view's weather card to obtain the user's location. In configuring this API, I ran into the issue of how to pass the location parameter, which only allows for the name of a location. So to resolve this issue, I use an additional API, Google Maps, to reverse geocode the latitude longitude to return the required name of the location that I then use to pass into the SERP API GET request. Let's take a quick look at the code for this view and the logic needed to render the event data. So I'm going to head to my index.js, my root level index.js. That's not it. Here we are. First, let's take a look at my root index.js, which is responsible for rendering all the components, views, and handling all of the functionality. In order to handle the acquisition of resources required for pages, I've utilized the before hook of the Navigo router coupled with a switch statement that is switching off of the name of the current view to ensure that I'm only retrieving information for the current view. So on 199, as previously mentioned, I use the browser API geolocation, specifically the get current position function, to obtain the user's location via latitude and longitude. And when I make my GET request, you can see the URL is pointing toward my local server, which is where I make the external API requests. I did this here and for all of my third-party API requests to further shield my API keys. Now let's go to my local server where I have the GET route set up. Here on line 65 and below, I instantiate new latitude and longitude variables that are equal to the front-end request latitude and longitude variables. Then I use my Google Maps API reverse geocode function to convert the latitude and longitude into locality information. But that isn't the last step. The JSON result for this API call included numerous location representation, such as political regions, voting districts, and etc. So after reviewing the response data, I found the key locality contained the city-state pairing value that offered the most reliable data to pass into the SERP API call. And immediately underneath, I make the call to return the data rendered in the view. Now let's return to the project. As you can see here, I've also added a favorite button for the user to save the data for the particular event as a MongoDB document, indicating that they will likely attend the event. So let's favorite an event. So I'm going to select Forever Plaid, and I'm going to click favorite. And as you can see here, I have an alert letting the user know that the event was successfully added. I'm going to click OK. Now let's switch over to the view where I'm rendering their favorited events, which is the My Events view. I'm going to scroll down, and as you can see, Forever Plaid is now being rendered. Here I'm making a request to obtain all events that I have favorited. In a future release, I'll add the Google Calendar API to also add the event to the group's shared calendar. Last but not least, let's switch over to my Photos view. Here I'm providing a form where I accept the user's file input. As a result of submitting this form, I have a route on my Express server that is responsible for both saving the image to disk as well as adding an entry to my database so that I can later display the homepage carousel. So here, I'll add an image. Click this one, and I'm going to click my Add Image button. Again, I receive an alert that says photo was uploaded successfully. I'm going to click OK. And to demonstrate the usage of that image, let's go ahead and head back to the home page. Taking a look at our carousel, I request all documents in my carousel store, similarly to how I did so in the favorited events. To provide a bit more presentation to this, I show the first entry from the list in my carousel and allow the user to flip between the indices inside that list and render the corresponding image when they do so. So let's go ahead and verify that the recently uploaded image is now in the carousel. Go over, and there it is. So in summary, my project allowed me to explore creating a full stack application, as well as designing my own version of a single page application. And in doing so, I had to interact with external APIs, allow the user to provide me with information, react to that information, and persist data when necessary in order to provide the user with the most updated information. That concludes my presentation. I'd love to answer any questions. If there aren't any questions, thank you all for your time.